Hi V, hi everyone else, and welcome to Gaping Chasm. Alright guys, so y'all voted on two different books that I was going to review that I read in the month of June. So today I am doing those reviews. To the people who are watching on YouTube, this is going up later on YouTube than it is going up on my Instagram. If you want to see my reviews earlier, check out my Instagram. I will have it linked down below. And the books that y'all voted for was Red, White, and Royal Blue and Song of Achilles. So yeah, we're just gonna go right into it. June was a great reading month. Check out my reading vlog if you're curious about the sort of in-depth stuff. But I read a lot of queer books for Pride, which wasn't intentional at the beginning of the month, but by the end of the month I embraced it. I was like, yes, let's just keep reading queer books. So pulling out my notes. Also, can I just say, I feel like very 90s today. So first off, we're gonna review Song of Achilles. Song of Achilles is by Madeline Miller. It came out, like 2012? 2011. I remember when it came out because it was like a really big thing. I also have taken a lot of classics courses in college because I just love Greek and Roman mythology in general. And so I was aware of it through that context as well. It's been a while since I've sat down and read the Iliad or the Odyssey or anything, but I have read them both and I enjoy the Iliad a great deal more. And yeah, anyway, I'd always planned on picking up Song of Achilles at some point just because of what it's about and also because of its ties to the Iliad and everything. So basically it's the story of Patroclus and Achilles. Achilles is the greatest warrior in Greece and Patroclus is his companion, and it's actually been a thing to read the two as lovers for a very long time. I think even Plato was reading them that way. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. It was amazing. I ugly cried at the end. Even knowing, the story of the Iliad and Patroclus and Achilles and how it had to end, it was still very emotional, and I think that's one of the highlights of the book. I actually think going into it, it benefited me to know how it was going to end and what happens to Achilles and Patroclus and just the myth of the Iliad. I think it benefited me to know that because it kind of added to the tension and the build-up. At the same time, I don't think you have to be familiar with the original text to enjoy this or to get the same sort of emotional impact. I think it's one of those books where whether you know what happens or whether you don't know what happens, you're going to enjoy it. You're going to just be pummeled by all the emotions, and I think that's okay. I think that's great. I think it's a very effective book that can elicit the same feelings regardless of whether you've been spoiled for the ending or not. I will say it did personally feel like a boon to me to know the ending ahead of time because I don't know, maybe it just made me feel like I had an in with the text or with the story somehow. Made me feel a little smarter. I don't know. I think I appreciated it on an extra level because I am familiar with the original text. I will say if you've read it and you haven't read the Iliad, I strongly recommend the Iliad. It's one of my favorite things. Just, it's a great story. It's up there, especially if you like fantasy. It's not well, it is. It's kind of fantasy. I would say it's the same scale of epicness as Game of Thrones, and I wish someone would someday just adapt the Iliad accurately into a wonderful miniseries or something. Just, that's my dream someday for that to happen. But I'd say if you've read this and you haven't read the Iliad, go read the Iliad. It's really good. You'll probably enjoy it. There's some great translations out there. I'll link some down below. I'll link the one that I read down below and that I like the most down below because I think it's a really easy to read translation and to understand, and it gets everything across. So yes, even though I've given this book 5 stars, I did have a little bit of a struggle with it, especially at the beginning. I think it's up until up through the Chiron stuff, or the first half of the Chiron stuff, so probably the first 60 pages or so, I just had a really hard time getting into it. I don't know if it was because of me at the time and just my mood or anything. I tried to be what was lacking in the first half that's there in the second half, because the writing is just as beautiful and evocative in the first half. And I think what it comes down to is before Achilles and Patroclus really click, but I mean at that point they've clicked and they're close and everything. I don't know, maybe it's because Patroclus is sort of passive feeling up until that point, I think that's it. I think it's because Patroclus just feels so very passive feeling. And I think even Chiron makes a note of that when they're leaving, that he wouldn't really fight for the things he wanted. I think maybe that's what it was. Just as a voice, he was too willing to succumb to situations. And that was really hard to get behind as a reader, I think. Achilles adds a lot to the story. It's Patroclus narrating, but it is in a lot of ways Achilles' story. Oh, I shouldn't say that though, because it's Patroclus' story too. But I feel like the story itself is best when it's the both of their story. So the stuff that predates Achilles' arrival on the scene just is also less interesting to me. I did like learning about Patroclus' childhood, and all the early stuff is important setup. But yeah, it was just kind of boring. That being said, it was boring, but it wasn't bad. From an objective point of view, it was really well written, and it sets up a lot of things happening later in the story, particularly the Trojan War. Obviously, there's the meeting where all the suitors arrive for Helen. And there's also a scene really early on where Patroclus is standing on a beach with his mother, and that's kind of very reflective of later in the text, without giving spoilers away. It's a very early scene. He's like 5. I think he claims it's his earliest memory. So yes, even though I was bored, or not, I guess I shouldn't say bored, I was bored, but more I was just not engaging with the text. Even though that wasn't happening for me, objectively, it's a very good beginning, and I don't think that it should be counted against the rest of the book. So I've mentioned that the writing is just gorgeous, and that's definitely one of the highlights of the story. Madeline Miller's gift with prose is phenomenal. I wish I could write half as good as she could. Maybe someday if I keep working at if I keep working at it. But gorgeous, gorgeous writing. And even beyond that, she's very good at evoking emotion without like shoving it in your face. I don't want to read any passages from far in the text because I don't want to spoil anything if you're unfamiliar with the tale or with this book in general, but I do want to just it is page 125. I want to read a passage, so if you don't want any spoilers, look away for like the next, I don't know, minute or so. She's just very good at evoking emotion that like you really feel it in your bones, like you feel like I don't know, it just feels very real, where I think a lot of writers are good at it, but she was good at doing it in a way that I didn't even notice she was doing it until after the fact, and I was feeling what the characters were feeling, and then I'd look back and I'd be like, oh my god, what a talent. So anyway, this is from page 125, which is in chapter 12, so we're just before the halfway mark. I am pregnant, the princess whispered. I was watching Achilles when she said it, and I saw the horror on his face. Lycomedes made a noise of pain. My chest felt hollowed and eggshell thin. Enough. Perhaps I said it, perhaps I only thought it. I let go of Achilles' hand and strode to the door. Thetis must have moved aside for me. I would have run into her if she had not. Alone, I stepped into the darkness. Wait, Achilles shouted. It took him longer to reach me than it should have, I noted with detachment. The dress must be tangling his legs. He caught up to me, seized my arm. Let go, I said. Please wait, please let me explain. I did not want to do it. My mother... He was breathless, almost panting. I had never seen him so upset. She led the girl to my room. She made me. I did not want to. My mother said... She said... He was stumbling over his words. She said that if I did as she said, she would tell you where I was. There is just a lot of gorgeous, evocative writing. And that is definitely one of the highlights of this book. And of course, as good as she is at writing these emotional scenes and just like getting you to feel those things, it's like put into like times 10 efficiency at the ending. Like, no spoilers. I'm not gonna spoil it, but if you are able to finish this book without crying, like, how did you do it? Because I was crying so much. I'm not gonna say when I start crying. No spoilers, no spoilers. I have actually gone through and reread the ending a couple times now, just like to keep reliving it because it's painful and beautiful and just emotional, and every time I reread it, even every time I just kind of think about it too much, I start like tearing up and crying, and yeah, it's amazing. And maybe you're like, wow, what a hard note to end on for this book, to like leave it feeling kind of sad, but you don't. It's not like a hopeless sad ending. It's a sad ending. It's a little bittersweet. I would say it's mostly sad. It's a tragedy. I mean, the Iliad is a tragedy. It's a tragic story on all fronts, and I enjoyed having it be a sort of sad ending. It has like bittersweet aftertaste to it, but it is sad more than anything else. I'm okay with that. I think that was really good. I don't think people value sad endings as much as they value happy endings, but I think it is just as emotional and important. And for this story in particular, it finishes the story the way it's meant to be finished, right? Like, it fits with the theme, it fits with everything that's being set up from page one. So, you know, sometimes sad endings are the proper way to end a story, even if it hurts. And I think there's something really brave about that. The last thing I want to say about this book is something I didn't even realize until after finishing it. It was while I was writing the review that I kind of came to the conclusion that this is kind of telling the parts of myth that don't get told. I'm just gonna read like what I wrote in my exact notes because I think it explains it pretty well, but in a way, reading this book feels like I was there for the bits the myth skipped over. I mean, obviously the ending bits aren't the skipped over bits, but in a lot of ways, these feel like the human moments that inform the myths, the things that are normally left out and beyond everything else. I think that's a nifty place to start telling a story. It's almost like mythologizing the myth. So yeah, it's kind of like the in-between scenes that don't make it into the stories that we're familiar with, and it kind of feels like that is an important aspect in its own way. So yes, that was kind of a realization I had while thinking about this book. So yes, 5 stars. I definitely recommend this book if you're a fan of the Iliad. I think you will enjoy it. There's definitely differences, especially depending on what translation of the Iliad you read, but I think in general it fills the spirit of the Iliad very well. If you're into mythology, definitely do that. If you're into queer literature, this is a great queer story. In general, I do think it's one of those books everyone should try. I think it is just a really lovely piece of literature. And I think a lot of people have read it. It's a pretty famous book. This is like, from this edition I have is the Bloomsbury Modern Classics edition. The other books that are like listed with that are like The Kite Runner and Eat, Pray, Love and The Little Friend by Donna Tartt, or Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So it's among good company in this collection, and I think, you know, that's a signifier as much as anything. I'm gonna say that this is a book worth picking up regardless of whether you think it's for you or not. I say give it a try. It's really beautiful, really easy to fall in love with this book. Alright, and then Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. So this book has gotten a lot of love recently. I've seen it just about everywhere, especially on Book Insta. It's about Alex, who is the son of the President of the United States, and Henry, who is a prince in England. And it's a love story. It's got like the meet cute. It's got a lot of the tropes, you know. They fall in love, but it's gotta stay kind of a secret. It's got, you know, the tension of Alex kind of figuring out that he actually likes boys. It's got the tension of Henry not being able to be out publicly. It's got, you know, politics, because both of their parents are big political figures. They're big political figures in their respective countries, all that stuff. Really tropey for like romance, but in like the good way that you like want it to fall into the tropes of the genre, because it's a lot of fun. But like I said, this one has been getting a lot of traction lately, and I definitely see why. I think originally I gave it 4 stars. I guess I'm gonna stick with that. I kind of waffle between 3.5 and 4 stars, but I think 4 stars is a good star rating for this one. I'm gonna start with my problem with it. The big problem was the ending. I liked the ending. I think it just, from a craft point of view, as a writer myself, I thought it went on too long. And it definitely, it wasn't like extraneous like the ending of like the Inheritance Cycle kind of feels, but it could have been so much tighter. The emotional climax and resolution comes a chapter before, so I think I did it 33 pages before or so of the final chapter. The emotional climax and resolution happen. And that's great. We didn't need like a 33-page final chapter. There's a lot of just what felt like filler, and it was definitely wrapping up other plot points. So in that way, it was like tightening the story, like there weren't just like random threads hanging. But it took a really long time to wrap those up. And yeah, this was just a case of like too much of an ending, too many answers. I didn't need to get like all the intricacies for all the characters. I could have been okay with bits and pieces being left up in the air. That being said, it wasn't a bad ending. It felt in line with the novel, but it was just kind of a slog to get through after, like, I felt like I had reached the peak and the natural conclusion of the novel as a reader, but it kept going. And I don't know, that just, it really bothered me. And the further I get from the book, the more bothered I am by that. It just, yeah, it frustrated me. It kind of took a lot of the impact out of the ending for me. That being said, so this novel is set in like a alternate universe 2020 with a much better president and just much better like world conditions. It's kind of a idealized in some ways America. And watching the like Alex's mother, I can't remember her name, she's the president in this book. Watching her campaign and her presidency was super cathartic. The final chapters really deal with the campaign and the re-election, which is the 2020 election in this book. If only our 2020 election was gonna go this way. It was really cathartic. It was really nice to be able to dip into this fantasy United States and be like, wow, that seems like a nice future idealized world we could live in. So that was really cathartic, and I loved just riding along with that because, yeah, the last election did not go really well. It was a really stressful moment in life. I ended up coping by watching the Lord of the Rings extended trilogy like back to back to back over the course of like 2 days. So really great. If you want to cope, if you want to dream about a better world we could be living in, definitely check this one out. So I don't want to take away that catharsis that the ending did deliver in addition, but yeah, it was just too much of an ending. And also in a sort of cathartic, idealized world kind of way, this book, how did I write it in my notes? I liked how normal it was for the characters to be gay and queer. That's not to say that they didn't deal with problems because of it. Henry especially has to stay in the closet and is really concerned about how his family would react because of his position in the royal family. So I'm not saying that it was like a world without those struggles, but it was like accepted by the world. Like it was an acceptable thing to be queer. You know what, I'm just gonna read what I wrote in my note because it makes a lot of sense in a really concise way. On a world level, I like that it was accepted by the public and that it wasn't that seen as a strange and wrong thing because of gayness and queerness, but because of the position that gayness and queerness put the characters in. Again, this was pretty cathartic to see a world where queerness is not defined as bad as wrong. I think our world is also very much moving that way, but this one seems to have taken it like a further step. I think it also, the issues or these struggles that the characters deal with because of being queer is centered around, it's centered around not the fact, oh, how am I I'm not explaining it how I wanted to. It's centered around not the fact that they are gay, but the fact that it's not centered around gayness being bad. It's centered around other people's positions on gayness being bad. Okay, editing Sam here. Just want to make sure I got my point across. The problems are centered around the fact that other people are homophobic and not the fact that the characters are queer. And also, a lot of the issues they face as a couple would be the same issues that like a heterosexual couple or a heterosexual passing couple would face in the same positions they are in. Does that make sense? So I liked that. That was also like a cathartic thing. It was also a really like lovely thing to see. It was really nice, especially because it is a romance novel and it's playing in a space that is often taken up by like straight romances, and it played really well in that space and it fits well in there. It's definitely a book that you can read because you're into royalty romances and not because you wanted to pick up an MLM book, you know? So romance readers, I am recommending this to you. It's really cute, really fluffy, really fluffy, regarding the queerness as well, I really love the bisexual representation. This is, I guess, a really minor spoiler. If you know what it's about, you know that it's not a spoiler. Okay. If you pick this book up knowing what it's about, it's not a spoiler. Alex is bi, and I really liked that. I liked that it was accepted. I liked that he came to this conclusion. I feel like I see a lot in like literature and in television. If a character who, and this typically happens for male characters and not female characters. I don't know why, I've just seen this trend. I'm not gonna name names, but it really bothers me every time I see it. Where a male character suddenly has feelings for another male character, and even if he had a relationship with a female character, it's always kind of determined that he's gay now. Or not now, but that he's gay. And that's not to say that like gay men can't have been in a relationship with a female person. Sure, it happens, especially if you're still figuring it out, right? But I almost never see the conclusion or even a conversation happen where it's like, well, maybe you're bi, maybe you like guys and girls, maybe you're pansexual, maybe you're something else, you know? I never really see that conversation come up or that option really be discussed, whether or not ends up being the case. It's just very, it's ignored like completely. And I really liked that in this book it's not ignored, and that Alex is bi, you know. I feel like we don't see that a lot, and I really appreciated it. And I really appreciated that he was really accepting of himself being bi once he kind of figured it out. And I really liked that the people around him were also really accepting of it, and that there wasn't biphobia. It's great to see a book without that. Yeah, I really appreciated that. I thought it was great. I think it's something that should be acknowledged more as a sexuality, especially in queer romances. Another thing I really liked were the email correspondences between Alex and Henry. Let me see if I can pull one up. They do texting a lot, but they at some point start doing like regular emailing between each other. And I really liked that. Here we go. So kind of like this. I really liked that. At first I was like, oh, this is gonna be really gimmicky, but it's really cute, and it actually made the time passing in the novel feel a lot smoother. They obviously have a long distance relationship. Alex lives in the US, Henry lives over in the UK, and you know, you can't see each other regularly if you're that far apart. So I liked that the emails really bridged that gap, and they felt like they were growing close through the emails as well. It was also, I loved the inclusion of like historical romance quotes. I thought that was cute. I added several to my collection of like quotes because I just think they're cute. Long stretches of time would pass, and to kind of cover that time, the emails were used. And yeah, it really, it kept the momentum going for the romance. It made logical sense for a long distance romance. Even though I knew like that time was passing and that they hadn't seen each other in person for maybe a while, it didn't feel like there was any disconnect there. So yeah, I really appreciate them. They were not gimmicky. They were fun to read. They were really well written, and I really appreciated them. I don't read a lot of romance. It's not my go-to genre. I have read some like specifically romance books in the past. It's been a couple years, I feel like, though, since I've picked up anything like that. So it was kind of out of my regular wheelhouse to pick this book up, but because it was getting so much traction, I decided, you know, why not give it a try? I don't regret it. It actually makes me curious to try to read more romance in general. I've seen a couple names flying around on Book Insta that I want to check out. Alyssa Cole, I believe, is one of them. Yeah, romance is not my go-to. It's just not as easy to turn my brain off and read romance. It's not as engaging, and it's not as easy to just like get lost in the world of a romance story, you know, the same way it is like a fantasy novel. But I did appreciate it, and I definitely think that it's a genre that I want to check out more of. So yeah, I appreciate that a lot. I'm also very excited for Casey McQuistion's next novel, which is like a time travel romance story, and I'm a sucker for time travel. Alright, thank you so much for watching my reviews. I hope it was interesting for you to hear what I had to say. I haven't done a proper review for books in a while, so I hope it wasn't all over the place. Yeah, and I recommend both of these books pretty strongly. I would say Song of Achilles over Red, White, and Royal Blue, but if you're looking for something lighter to maybe get you through the summer, Red, White, and Royal Blue is super fun, and like I said, super cathartic, especially if you're stressed out about the current situation that the US is in. I might end up rereading selected passages come November. Song of Achilles, 5 stars. Red, White, and Royal Blue, 4 stars. I hope to do another set of these reviews for books at the end of, or for things I read in July. So hopefully I do a bit of reading in July. Thank you for watching. If you're on YouTube, do not forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more reviews, more bookish videos, and more just videos in general from both V and myself. And if you're on Instagram, maybe give me a follow over on my account. I love talking about books, obviously. Alright, goodbye V, goodbye everyone else. I'm gonna go have lunch.